Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. In August of 1998, the movie review world was changed forever by a little-known site by the name of RottenTomatoes.com. It took every review out on the web and aggregated it into a percentage that was then tallied to be a rotten or fresh tomato. Now, editor-in-chief of Rotten Tomatoes, Joel Meares, and his team have put together their and our favorite rotten movies for their new book, Rotten Tomatoes, Rotten Movies We Love. And he's here to talk to us about it now. Please welcome Joel Meares. Let's hear it. Hey, Joel.
Hey, how you doing, Ricky?
Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
A lot of my favorite movies are in this book. I imagine there are a lot of your favorite movies as well.
A ton of my favorite movies are in this book, and I was actually shocked to discover that they were rotten.
Well, that's one of the things that critics are just in a different place, I think, when they're watching movies for the first time, and they don't really see how something could last. I mean, I will say the cover of the book is Step Brothers, and the first time I saw Step Brothers, I was kind of irritated by it. But now I have seen Step Brothers, I own it, I watch it regularly.
Quote it endlessly, I'm sure.
Quote it endlessly. Anytime I'm feeling bad, I watch the deleted scenes and the bloopers. It's maybe my favorite comedy that there is.
Well, we thought the Step Brothers was really emblematic of what we wanted to do with the book, which was to acknowledge that there are these films that come out, they get a certain reception, maybe they end up on the green end of the tomato meter, but they have a life after that, and they find an audience, and they find a story. So something like Step Brothers, again, I think it's at 55% on the tomato meter. I'm not sure what was out at the time of its release, but I suspect slightly even lower than that. And I think it's fair to say it's become a comedy classic. And there's a lot of examples of that in this book.
Wet Hot American Summer as well.
Yeah, Wet Hot American Summer. Empire Records is at 29%.
I do not stand Empire Records.
Oh no! Well, explain yourself immediately.
I liked it when I was 13 years old. They were in a record store. It was so cool. I have watched it as an adult, and I have been like, this is not funny. This does not hold up. I do not. Renee Zellweger is adorable in it.
She is incredible in that movie. Yeah.
And I still listen to Sugar High every now and then. There's another song from the soundtrack that I listen to as well, and the Cranberries, of course. But the movie itself, I just find to be so juvenile, not juvenile in a fun Step Brothers-y kind of way, but in a narrative, dramatic way. It just doesn't work for me.
But you can see one of the other things about the book is that a lot of the films are films that people see at a certain time in their lives and that they connect with in a certain way. And you can sort of see 90s kids going to the local Blockbuster, seeing that poster of Liv Tyler, and all the people behind her, etc., latching on, seeing that soundtrack, thinking that that was what cool music was, when actually cool music had probably advanced a little beyond what was cool in the actual world of Empire Records, and really connecting with these characters who were outsiders. And I think people carry that through their lives and sort of find a sort of nostalgic affinity with the time of their lives when they go and rewatch those films. Like you said with Step Brothers, if you're feeling down, you go and watch it. If you were an Empire Records head, you go and watch that and feel a certain way too.
Right, it reminds you of a certain time of your life, as you're saying. I totally understand that. I tried to approach Empire that way. Like, I was feeling down, I was like, this will remind me of and I just couldn't get through it.
You're not celebrating Rex Manning Day next year, it sounds like.
Yeah, the Rex Manning story alone was kind of like, I was like, why does this girl like Rex Manning? She works in a record store. She's an adult.
That is a fair criticism, I will say that. Yeah.
Right. It would seem that the obvious thing for Rotten Tomatoes to do would be to publish a book of the greatest reviewed movies of all time. But did that feel too obvious for you? What made you go with the rotten movies that we love?
Yeah, well, it's our first book ever. And as you said, we've got certified fresh. We've got 100% fresh. There are all these ways we could have gone. But we felt that one of the things that people don't necessarily instinctively think about when they go to Rotten Tomatoes is that there is a lot more than just the score. The score, sure, it's a recommendation. The audience score is a recommendation. But we always also see it as a starting point for a discussion and a debate. So you go and see something, was it worth 55%? Do I agree with that? What's the story behind how critics receive this? And we thought that was a much more interesting approach for the first book that we wrote, because these films really do have compelling stories and compelling afterlives. We've got Paul Feig, who wrote the foreword, who, for those who don't know, is the director of Bridesmaids and several other very fresh movies, actually, including Ghostbusters, the most recent Ghostbusters.
Is that fresh?
It is fresh. It's not certified fresh, I don't believe, but it is fresh. And he writes this sort of foreword that's really interesting. It's about how filmmakers don't ever set out to make bad movies, but that there is a point at which you hand your movie over into the public sphere, it's released, and then you don't really have control over what its afterlife is, or its new life in a sense. sense. So you get the critical reception, then you get the home video reception, or home streaming reception, and then it either gets lost into the ether and no one ever thinks about it again, or one person somewhere in the world thinks about it, or it finds a community. And that's what a lot of these films did. And we thought the way that people associate with the films and the things they find in it was really interesting. And so we had, I don't want to ramble, but we had 16 critics from all over the world also write extended essays for this book. And it's really fascinating to see the way in which those guys connected with the films they wrote about.
Yeah, my favorite one is probably Eric Hahn on Gummo, because Gummo is just like a movie that I love. But my second favorite is maybe the essay on Dr. Giggles, because I was so surprised to see that called out and talked about. That is a movie that for me was monumental when I was a kid, because it was maybe the pinnacle of the sort of horror boogeyman punch, like one-liner character, which just sort of ended by the mid 90s. Even when you had Scream, the guy in the mask didn't really have a one-liner when he was killing people.
No, definitely. He had it before on the phone, but they were sort of just more brutal descriptions of what he was going to do. But for those who don't know, Dr. Giggles, essentially a doctor who kind of talks like, he has cheap one-liners. It's sort of Freddy Krueger-esque, but he's not burned. And he's crazy, and it's a great performance at Larry Drake. And we have this essay written by Amy Nicholson, who, April Wolf, my apologies, who is on a podcast called Switchblade Sisters. And she just fell in love with this movie, as many of us do with horror movies as a kid, watching it on VHS and being utterly terrified. Now, is it still scary today for her? Perhaps not, but she does really interestingly dissect how this movie, which some dismissed as trash at the time, actually was borrowing from some of the best horror movies ever made. So I think it's really fascinating. Eric Cohn, yes, I can see you definitely loving. I can see you as a Gummo man, and I understand how you related to that. One of my favorite essays, although I have to say I love them all equally, is about Rocky IV, and that is by Amy Nicholson, and it's sort of a really interesting dissection of how Rocky IV arrived at this time in American-Russian relations and what Sylvester Stallone was trying to do with that movie. Its commentary on Soviet-U.S. discrepancies in sort of lifestyle was really fascinating. So yeah.
What I love about Rocky IV is that it's about 80% new movie and 20% footage from previous movies.
Yeah, I mean...
I think there are 5 music videos within that movie as well.
I don't know that there's an 80s power ballad or a rock metal ballad that isn't in that film.
Right,
so,
that wasn't used.
No, yeah.
And there's that great montage where he's driving and thinking, but so clearly not driving. Like, it just keeps... He's thinking of scenes from the movie that we've already watched and movies from the past. And he's sitting in his... He's supposed to be driving, but it just looks like he's sitting in his garage in the car. Yeah.
Yeah. Driving and thinking. Was he doing either? I guess the question is if it was Sly.
So how did you guys go about choosing the movies? You have, I'm sure, a list of movies that that didn't make the cut.
Oh, so many movies didn't make the cut. So we have the power to push a button essentially and get a list printed for me of the team of every rotten movie ever made. So that's a huge list. That's tens of thousands of movies. So we essentially went through a sort of long list. We narrowed down some of the criteria in terms of number of reviews movies needed to have. And then as a staff, we kind of just discussed it. We thought, what are the themes we're going to be looking at here? So the book is actually divided into a number of thematic chapters. So we've got cult classics. We've got movies that are so bad they're good. We've got movies that became inexplicably popular either at the box office or on home video. We've got movies that were ahead of their time. Think things like Jennifer's Body. And so we started to see, where do these films fit into those categories? And then also, what did we have to say about these films? Because if it was a movie that just happened to be enjoyable and there wasn't really much beyond that to say, or it didn't fit into some larger cultural context, or it didn't have an interesting narrative after its cinema release, what's the point of writing about it? Because the book isn't just a list of films and scores. We give historical context. We talk about how and why they were received certain ways at the time, and we document their journey to becoming actual rotten movies we love.
Another, I'll just talk about my favorites.
Please, go ahead.
Book, is Bloodsport. The Van Damme film, Bloodsport. I was very excited to see that captured in this book. It is kind of, in some ways, my Empire Records in the way that I saw it when I was really young and I watched it all the time, and now I watch it I still watch it consistently and quote it.
That sparked something in my mind when you said about movies that didn't make the cut. I think people would be surprised not to see Street Fighter in this
Or
book.
Hard Target.
Or
I mean,
Hard
although I
Target.
don't
Or
know if
just
Hard
isn't
Target's fresh.
It might be. I don't know if Time Cop or Universal Soldier is fresh, but there are all these Van Damme movies.
Universal Soldier actually might be fresh. I vaguely remember that being well reviewed upon release.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I don't disagree with that. When was the Universal Soldier sequel released? Was there was a semi-recent one though, wasn't there, that they tried to put into? Yeah,
there's been many recent ones, but one of the more recent ones was like surprisingly well made. I haven't seen that many of them, but I had heard that this particular one, forgive me for not remembering the subtitle of it.
Yeah.
But someone said it was like the director was a little bit better. You should check it out. And I watched it. And yeah, he was, but it was still a Universal Soldier movie.
Yeah, but there were movies that, were left on the cutting room floor, and Street Fighter was one of the ones that was regrettable for me because it stars an Australian pop star called Kylie Minogue, and as both a gay man and an Australian, anything she's in, including she's in a book. She's in a movie in this book, San Andreas. Right. Yeah, she gets thrown off a building very early in the piece.
But not Biodome isn't in this, and she's
Biodome
in Biodome.
Is not. See, that's another thing. There's very few Pauly Shore movies. So I think
any Pauly Shore in?
No, he might be a side character, but there's no Pauly Shore vehicles in it, which makes me think we need to print a volume 2 stat.
What Pauly Shore vehicle would you? I mean, I would go Biodome personally.
Biodome, I really like. Son-in-Law, is that what it's called?
That's the first.
That's
that was the one that launched the movie career.
Even though it's not necessarily a vehicle, but it's his breakout film, I did as a kid love Encino Man.
Yeah.
And can do, well, I'm not going to do it, but, I did when I was young, do the Who's and the Jews. And then, but it's...
Cheese is old and moldy. Where is the bathroom?
Yes, exactly. But there are people like Pauly Shore. So I shouldn't equate Sandler to Pauly Shore, but there are these sort of comedy breakout stars who certainly appear in this book. So Farrell, I believe, is in a couple of them. Jim Carrey, Ace Ventura is in there. The
Cable Guy.
Cable Guy, of course. Incredible film. It sort of straddles two themes. I think it was ahead of its time and maybe misunderstood, but also managed to become a cult classic.
I kind of feel like there is a comparison that can be made between, and stick with me here,
I'm going to.
Joker and The Cable Guy.
Oh.
Two extremely heavy-handed movies that are trying to be about a very specific moment in time, that if you are over the age of 30, you're probably like, okay, I got it. And if you're like 15 years old, it's brilliant satire and really, really smart.
That's your take. No, I think
you're not rolling with me on that one.
I don't know if I'm going to roll with you exactly on that one. I think that The Cable Guy, which I've revisited relatively recently,
it's a really funny,
really
movie.
Darkly subversive film. I will say one of the comparisons between those films, which I think is very apt, is that they do sort of center around a really compelling or interesting central performance with dark tones that sort of swallows the whole film into the vacuum of its sort of charisma.
A loner who desperately wants to be noticed, like his favorite characters on television, who's sort of swallowed up into the pop culture vacuum that he's so desperately trying to be a part of.
Look, you're convincing me. There's a think piece in there. I think you need to get behind a typewriter stat.
And I believe The Cable Guy ends with everybody shutting off the TV, but also with a vaguely similar, like Natural Born Killers montage of like things in the news that everybody had been watching at that time, right? Am I wrong? Does Cable Guy end with like an OJ?
It is very possible. I need to go and rewatch the ending specifically. The thing that stands out for me is the medieval times.
I know there's a Menendez spoof within it.
Yeah.
But I do think at the end as well, everyone shuts off the TV and there's a kind of I might just be thinking of Natural Born Killers, but I thought they both did it.
I'm getting my brain melded between the very fresh Truman Show and Cable Guy, which feels like they could be in the same universe if it wasn't the same actor. What is your favorite Jim Carrey film?
That is really hard. I might just say Dumb and Dumber. I know that's not.
That's very good.
I'm a Farrelly Brothers stan. I don't like maybe not their late work, and maybe not. What was the last one that just won Best Picture? That I can't remember the name of.
Green Book.
Green Book. Thank you. But their first three movies, right out of the gate, I don't think any comedy director, with the exception of maybe Paul Feig, has made three like just sort of perfect broad comedies. Dumb and Dumber, Kingpin, Something About Mary.
Yeah.
The three of which hold up beautifully.
Kingpin is definitely my Farrelly Brothers movie. Really, really just great work. And actually doesn't get the love it deserves, I think. No, would you consider Kingpin to have become a cult classic?
Yes.
Yeah.
For those who know it, it absolutely is.
But I'm just thinking, because when we're thinking in the book, we deal in cult classics, and
But I think it's probably fresh because critics liked it.
Yeah. I don't know 100%. I don't know 100% if it's fresh right now in my head, but I suspect it would be.
So, yes, I'm assuming.
But it's not one of those films necessarily that I see people going on Halloween dressed as the characters. Although I think I could work the Bill Murray hair by the end in my own little mop up there.
What are you guys? We're Kingpin.
Yeah, we're Kingpin. Or it's not, I don't see many, screenings at Alamo of Kingpin. So I'm sort of, has it necessarily formed a community, or is it a thing that lives in the hearts of certain, discerning comedy lovers?
You don't see that with Mary either. Even though Mary was a box office smash.
That's true.
And probably was the precursor for like American Pie and all of the gross out comedies. You don't really see that with that either. Everybody really just holds up Dumb and Dumber.
Yes.
Because they were like really young when that came out.
Yeah.
I think. But
and it had a broader appeal to the really young guys.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
But Kingpin and Mary both are, I mean, for my money, better movies and also funnier movies as well.
Yeah, no, definitely into it. But we've got lots of Carrey. We've got several Sandler.
You got Madison. What other Sandler do you have in there?
Oh, now you've got me on the thing. I know we've definitely got Billy Madison.
Yeah.
And is there one more?
I think you just got.
There's 101 movies, so you're putting me on the spot for a second.
I apologize. Definitely got Billy Madison in there.
Yeah. One Sandler movie that definitely isn't rotten, and I don't know if you've seen it yet, but did you see Uncut Gems?
No, not yet. I'm
okay.
excited.
I know we're talking about the rotten, but that movie is so fresh, and it's coming out this year, and it's fantastic.
Yeah,
and it's
Sandler
Sandler's looking at a statuette potentially.
You think so?
I think he's looking at it. I think he's definitely going to be nominated in certain critics circles, and I think he may make it to awards season.
Yeah, I think I mean, I have no idea. I haven't seen the movie, but awards.
It's really good though.
I know it is. Like, I know it's going to be great.
I was skeptical, and I went in there, and I thought everyone's talking about the buzz, and I went in and I said, that is one of the best male performances I've seen this year. It's not just Angry Adam. It's beyond that.
I am not skeptical of his performance or the movie. I am skeptical of Academy voters.
Okay.
I mean, simply based off of the takes that, not to keep talking about Joker, it's not a movie that I love, but the takes on Joker that I've read in the recent Feinberg pieces where the Academy voters are saying, like, I don't know if this movie should be banned or awarded. It's like, well, then you shouldn't be talking about movies if that's your opinion. Like,
yeah, that's a take.
What is Joker at right now, considering that's the movie of the month?
It's moving between 69 and 70% at the moment.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think it's fresh. People seem to love it. The audience score is very high.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's at 90% audience score right now.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to argue with a 96 million opening weekend in the US for what's essentially a pretty serious drama.
I think it's a comedy, actually.
Well, he's a clown, so there's definitely comedy in it.
He does walk into a door. There are two moments in the back half of the movie that are so slapstick that it's kind of alerting you that this may have been a really dark comedy the whole time, or is at least going to become as dark a comedy as possible.
There is definitely no spoilers for those who are worried, but there is definitely a door that gets walked into, and it does make you giggle, if not cackle, Joker-like.
I'm telling you, there's an argument to be made for Cable Guy and Joker being to be watched together.
You need to write this. Pitch this as a double bill to one of the theaters around here, and then see how you go.
Or I'll just watch them at home by myself
and tweet about it as you do, and then I'll chime in.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh well, one of the movies that's in the book that I was tweeting about over the weekend that you jumped in was Scream 3, which is on. I think all of the Scream movies are on Netflix right now.
Yes, all 4 Scream movies.
For whatever reason, in a state of boredom and slight depression, I chose Scream 3 to watch, and at first wasn't so sure about it, but then was sort of blown away, and I found it to be maybe my favorite Scream movie.
I think it's potentially the most fun Scream movie because it has a lightness of, I don't know, tone, because the central plot and what the under sort of lying themes of the film are actually quite dark, and I don't want to spoil it, but it is a little Me Too. But it's very much the most cartoonishly comedic of those films, and they place it in Hollywood, and they take the piss out of Hollywood, and there's some really fun performances around the central three characters of Sidney Gale and Dewey. There's Parker Posey, who's
Detective Dempsey?
Detective Dempsey, who's a really sort of skinny-looking Patrick Dempsey.
Has no business being a detective in a movie. It's
No,
hilarious.
he's just obsessed with Hollywood, and he's got and actually Emily Mortimer is quite fun. She's got a few lines, but every time she speaks, it's like, oh, you're Emily Mortimer, and you're awesome.
Yeah.
But it's a really fun. I actually have love for the entire series of those films. I think when you grew up at a certain time in the '90s and snuck into a movie theater to see Scream when you weren't supposed to, it maybe ignited a passion for horror in me. So I'm a little bit biased, but that film I think is in the 30s, 36%, which is a little bit shocking to me. And the criticisms at the time were that it had become what the Scream series originally parodied. But I think it just evolved into something more comedic, and people perhaps missed that transition.
What's interesting is that I think I enjoy that more because when I watch the first Scream movie now, it's still very good and probably the most well-made of the movies. But there is something about the self-reflexive aspect of it that takes itself a little too seriously and thinks it's a little smarter than it actually might be. Whereas Scream 3 kind of owns the whole thing and is funny and goofy about it. And when it's smart, it's like you said, it's sort of it's underplaying its smartness.
And it has a fantastic cameo, Carrie Fisher.
Yes, of course. A little more than a cameo.
Yeah,
I thought she was going to be the killer at one point.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was one of the things that I liked about it, I was genuinely baffled about who the killer was going to be.
Yeah, because they kind of cheat, but that's
They absolutely cheat.
yeah.
We have time for some questions. Couple questions in the audience. Who's a question?
Hi there. Ooh, very loud. I was wondering what film that came out in recent years that wasn't received that well you think might have a second life in the future?
Ooh, a film that wasn't received particularly well that might have a second life.
Well, you have one in here. You have The Greatest Showman.
We have The Greatest Showman, but I think that had a pretty big first life, even though it wasn't necessarily well received. I mean, can you turn on the radio and avoid that song? So I actually think there was a movie this year called Ma. And does anyone remember Ma? You're laughing at me. You must have seen it. But it's essentially a kind of mix of Carrie meets Whatever Happened to Baby Jane with Octavia Spencer at the center of it. And it's not a phenomenal film, and I don't think it goes far enough in its sort of climax. But her performance, I think, was not given enough attention. And I think that it was so kind of rightly camp and spot on, and I think it could have a second life. We discussed Greta, I think, last time I was here, and I don't know that that's going to have quite the same second life, but there are thematic similarities.
There's good stuff in Greta. It's just not. It's just missing like a little bit of enough camp to sort of to hold on to that.
But Octavia is just, I love Octavia Spencer, and I think she's having an incredible year. She was also in Loose,
I like Loose a lot.
which is a really smart film, and she's supporting in that, and I think she's really incredible. But she's having lots of fun in Ma, and I couldn't help but go along for the ride.
I think Jupiter Ascending.
Oh, definitely.
Might be will be a movie that people latch onto. And also, what was the one that came out at the beginning of this year, end of last year, maybe? That was
Anne Hathaway and Matthew McConaughey. Is this?
Well, there's that Serenity.
Serenity is definitely going. It's going to be a stoner favorite, like that. Yeah, that.
But I was thinking more the Peter Jackson produced.
Mortal Engines.
Mortal Engines.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I actually I haven't seen it, but I know that some people.
Some people have enjoyed that, have they?
It, yeah.
Okay. That's a choice. No, I did not dislike Mortal Engines, but I don't know that it's going to have a huge afterlife, even with his name attached.
Right. One more.
Hi. I was just wondering if you have a favorite movie.
Oh, lordy. A favorite movie of all
Scream
time.
3.
Scream 3. No, actually, my favorite of the Scream series is Scream 2. So I think we're...
Really?
Yeah. I don't know.
I should go back and watch 2.
Yeah, I think
One
you should
I've
go
seen
back and watch...
too many times.
Yeah. No, Scream 2 is really enjoyable. That's not my favorite of all time, apologies. Probably being John Malkovich. I actually, without getting sappy... so Rotten Tomatoes started in 1998. and I was in Sydney, Australia as a teenager of some age and finding movies essentially through the site. And when that film came out, it coincided with a sort of art house theatre opening relatively close to me. And so I saw the score, I read about it, I said, this shit looks weird and interesting. And so I think I took myself to go and see Being John Malkovich in theatres, not necessarily knowing much about Spike Jonze or anything like that, or Charlie Kaufman, and went and saw it and went, oh, wow, this is what modern movies can be. And it's so screwed up and funny and well made and well performed that it kind of blew my mind. And I think oftentimes our favorite movies are about the experience we have watching them the first time or over and over again. And I think that's why that one connects with me. What's yours? Can I ask? I'm putting you on the spot now.
Oh my gosh. I'm a big Birdman fan, but
Very nice. Very nice. The Academy agrees with you, I think, on that one.
But I think that also makes sense. How old are you?
21.
Yeah, 21. Birdman came out like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah,
For
that's
me, like,
perfect timing.
Exactly. That's the kind of thing where you're like 17, 18 years old and you go, holy shit, a movie can be like this? You know, like I had that with, which I think you had with Being John Malkovich. You had no idea that a movie could be that sort of offbeat and weird.
Yeah. What was yours?
Boogie Nights,
Oh,
probably.
okay. Yeah.
When I was in like far too young to see it, but the opening shot and going down the street and then going into the club, it was the first time that I was kind of like, wait, this is all one thing. What is he doing?
Yeah.
You know, and then you just keep watching it. And then it gets so dramatic and mean at times that I wasn't expecting that either. You know, yeah, it blew me away. And it also like, the internet was a big thing, so you could be like, what are his favorite movies? And
Yes.
start looking at Truffaut and Scorsese and all that stuff. So it just opened the door.
Yeah. What did people do before the internet? These
Yeah, I
matters.
don't know. I mean, I guess like a few people had books.
Did they read books? Like
Well, there was David Thompson's The Encyclopedia
yeah, of
of
course.
Film, right?
And Leonard Moulton's
Moulton.
actually featured in the book.
Ebert's books as
Ebert's
well.
books, of course. Leonard's rotten movie that he loves is Bela Lugosi meets a gorilla at the Brooklyn Zoo, or Brooklyn Gorilla, I think it is. It's just from the 50s and sounds batshit and amazing. Yeah.
Joel, it's good to see you.
Always good to see you.
Thanks for coming by.
for having
Rotten
me.
Movies We Love is on shelves now. People can pick it
Absolutely.
up.
You can order it. You can go to your local and it's going to be there.
It's a wonderful book. If you love movies, you have to have this on your shelf because if you're ever wondering what to watch, you can open this up and you can watch anything in it. They're all fun.
That's the idea. So enjoy.
Joel Meares, everybody. Let's hear it.